Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Flyered Up podcast. I'm your host, Amadeo Gracia, along with my partner, Chris Mayer, and we have a special guest for you today. We have former Flyers enforcer, tough guy, and now part of Cote culture and Body Chek Wellness, Riley Cote. Riley, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on, Riley, and just like in your time with the Flyers, just like being an enforcer and all that. Like, what's being an enforcer and getting your way into the NHL like? Like, what's the difference between an enforcer than say another type of skill set player?
Well, it was an interesting ride for me. Obviously, the difference between the enforcer and a goal scorer is that you're on the team to score goals and one's to enforce and fight. But it wasn't always on my radar to be an enforcer. It was just something I realized I had to do to give myself a standing chance to ever play in the NHL. So, growing up in youth hockey, I was a big fish in a small pond here or back home in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and thinking I was, a good hockey player. And then I eventually got drafted to the Western Hockey League and realized how good the talent was. And even in that pool of hockey players in Western Canada from 16 to 20 years old, I was, now a small fish in a big pond, realizing that there's some pretty amazing hockey players out there. And that was just, a fraction, a small fraction of the part of the world. So, I soon realized, I was humbled by the experience, but I soon realized that, wow, I didn't get drafted at 18 years old, 19 years old, that I had to do something else. And that was obviously get my hands dirty. So it was a decision that I made when I was 20, when I turned pro, that I, decided to be an enforcer. So my 4 years in junior hockey, I think I've been in a total of 15 fights in 4 years. And then my first year pro, I was fighting, 30, 35 times a year from there on. So it was just one of those things I just decided to do. I committed to the role. I became the role, and it was just it was my path forward. But almost to a fault, I almost forgot that I was a hockey player and probably trained too much for fighting, and probably embraced that role a little too much in the sense that it just consumed me. So I was so worried about the hit and the fight versus actually playing hockey and then fighting. But it's kind of one of those things that the way I'm wired is just like I'm all in. Whatever I commit to, I'm all in. And that was one of those examples. And it landed up being my demise. You know what I mean? Just going so hard on and off the ice. And but it was an amazing journey. I wouldn't have done it any other way. I learned so much about the game, myself, and just the human body and mind, honestly, along the way. It's been an incredible teacher for me.
And just finding your way to the Flyers organization. I know you were a walk-on for the Toronto Maple Leafs, coming out of your draft year. But then, how did you find your way into the Flyers organization? Starting with the Phantoms, then eventually getting called up to the big team.
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, as my overage year, I could have gone back to junior. I landed up signing with the St. John's Maple Leafs, and I landed up going to Toronto Maple Leafs training camp, and signed a contract with their American League team, and landed up in the Central Hockey League that whole. My first year pro, we won. I'm drawing a blank on a President's Cup in the Central Hockey League. Won the championship, so it was a pretty good overall year as far as winning and being on a good team. But it was also in the Central Hockey League, and I wanted to get the hell out of that league as quickly as I possibly could. So the next year, I landed up going to Columbus Blue Jackets training camp and landed up signing a deal with their American League team with Syracuse Crunch, and then spent most of the year that season in Dayton in the East Coast Hockey League. So after that second year pro, and that was a horseshit year, a terrible year. Bad coach, just wasn't playing. So I was kind of defeated. I was like, oh man, this is the end of it for me. There's no way I'm moving up after this. So I landed up signing back with my Central Hockey League team that I had won the championship the year previous. And I wasn't there 3 days, and then Ron Hextall called me up, and that was 04-05. That was the previous lockout. Hexy called me up and says, listen, the team's starting off in Hartford. We're down a couple guys. Want to sign into a 25-game professional tryout agreement. Come meet the team in Hartford, and we probably land up staying for the weekend, and then we'll probably sending you back down. You're just being honest based on numbers and everything. So packed up all my shit, got on a plane, flew to Hartford, and long story short, I landed up signing 4 PTOs that whole season. Landed up leading the team in fighting majors and penalty minutes, and won a Calder Cup. So it was just landed up being a mixture of me taking advantage of an opportunity, but also getting some help, with obviously guys getting injured and, having an opportunity to get in the lineup because I wasn't drafted. I was, not associated with the organization at all. And understanding how, the politics in sports, they're always, they're always giving their draft picks, a standing chance to play. So, having not being drafted in the organization, it was, an amazing opportunity for me and one I'll never forget because we ended up winning and having an amazing team that year. And then after that, we won the Calder Cup. I ended up negotiating a 2-year deal with Bobby Clark, who was the general manager at the time. So didn't have an agent at the time and just worked on a 2-year deal. And then, spent the next year with the Phantoms, and the following year I ended up making the team out of training camp. Got sent down, broken ankles, out the whole year, and finished up the season with the Flyers. And I guess the rest was history. I ended up sticking around the next few years after that. But it was certainly an interesting ride. You talk about momentum. We're having someone believe in you. John Stevens believed in me. I felt that Rick started. Paul Holmgren believed in me. Those are the two guys I probably were in contact the most. And Chief, obviously, Craig Berube. But it's just one of those things. You just need to get an opportunity, and obviously you got to take advantage of it because it's not easy to stay. It's not easy staying in the NHL. Like 23 man roster, and I was a fringe guy, and obviously I acknowledge that. So I'm very replaceable. There's a ton of guys fighting for my job and just that position, that 13th forward, if you want to call it that. It was amazing. It was just one of those things where. At some point there after that second year, I think there's no way I could ever, find my way to the NHL now, just the way things were going. But, again, it's just like going back to the Central Hockey League, just getting that one opportunity and taking advantage, 25-game trial. They couldn't even give me a full-on contract that year because they were all stacked up with, NHL and American League contracts from the previous years. So it was fun. It was a great experience, being around a winning team and a lot of winners. Our team was surrounded by a lot of guys that landed up winning Stanley Cups in other markets, but a lot of guys that never even played in the NHL until that Calder Cup year, and then they moved on to play in the NHL. So it was all around an amazing experience.
Yeah, and Chris, and definitely you're too young to remember the Phantoms win the Calder Cup that year. How old were you when the Phantoms won the Calder Cup?
I was only 2 years old, so it definitely sucked. Being that was that team like broke records with attendance and all that stuff. But Riley, I wanted to ask and I wanted to go back to the previous question about how you said like you had to become a fighter. Is that like different when knowing you have to fight without having like any like negative emotion, or is it just like you have to fight, or is it like it's so like it's tougher to fight knowing like you have to fight, or is it like easier to fight knowing like if you're pissed off or something like happened like in a game before or something like that?
Well, I've learned that it's always better to fight in its calmest manner you can fight, right? So not to be fighting when your emotions are high. So angry fighting is never really ideal for understanding when you want to fight. But that being said, I did appreciate a very spontaneous fight more than a stage fight, where a stage fight, meaning that I knew I was going to fight. It was just a matter of when and the timing and, lining up in the face off and, having that built up anxiety versus like, I just love when like fights would come to me where like I ran somebody over, you know what I mean? Just like a big hit, like just a good hockey play and then blow somebody up. And then all of a sudden someone comes after me and then it's like totally instinctive, there's no thinking about it. There's none of that mind game. It's just like pure, just pure battle now. So, but even in those moments, I wasn't fighting out of a place of anger. I wasn't fighting out of a place of, adrenaline and self-defense, if you want to call it that. But I can't even remember if I ever even actually was really, truly ever mad. Tell you the honest truth, How many times like you act mad? You're playing the role. If someone took a cheap shot, you're yelling at them and stuff like that. But as far as like being actually really truly mad, there's certainly not probably even a handful of times that I fought that was that angry. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, because like it's funny. Like I've been seeing a lot of like stuff now with like everything, like how everybody has a podcast now, and like when you see stuff that are guys like that. You hear all those stories that like some guys like just fight to fight, and it's like they're not even mad. So I was just wondering if you ever did that, or for anything along those lines.
Yeah, it was probably like that. Honestly, it was the fight to fight. It was like my
Yeah.
job. You know what I mean? It
Mm-hmm.
was like training. It's like, I guess UFC fighters and boxers,
Yeah.
essentially, fight their own teammates and training partners. It's just like it's business. It's a job. There's no real true emotion behind it besides like being a warrior and actually putting in your sweat and blood into it, right? So, and then you're obviously emotionally connected to your team and everything. But there's so, I say as far as heavyweights go, most heavyweights were very respectful towards each other. There was a lot of honor in what we did. Obviously, now and then freak things would happen, and guys would go ballistic. But for the most part, I look at a good majority of all my fights against heavyweights, it was nothing but respect and honor in it. You know what I mean? You're patting each other on the back after. It was just like straight up business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just like with the league that it is today, like as we know, like in NHL and previous, like in the early 2000s, the 90s, like there were times where there was a lot of fights just breaking out. Like fights were normal in the game, but as you start to progress into like the previous decade into the 2010s, fights are starting to become less and less of a thing. So like as a fighter yourself, like how do you perceive like do you think that's a good thing for the league itself to go transitioning to more of a skilled game, or do you think like there was like some things with the fighting that brought out a different side of the game that maybe the game today is missing? Because definitely some fans would think that.
Yeah, well, a little bit of both, honestly. So I do appreciate the skill game, the amount of training and resources that these guys are pouring into is amazing. They're absolute freaks of nature, powerful, explosive, strong, and skilled. Like the skill game is high end, and I appreciate that. And I think that's the direction it needs to go. However, I don't think you have to pick one or the other. I think that there has been a lack of accountability in the game because it's gone, maybe say overly skilled. I don't even think it's gone overly skilled. They just removed that element of accountability. I understand they're still fighting in the game, but they've built these rules around almost taking it out completely. I think if you can find a hybrid type of player that, like I say, Zach Ronaldo can still feel around and get some big hits and fight. He's not a heavyweight, but he's a gamer, and he can stir it up. He can skate against the forecheck, but he's also unpredictable, and guys would look over their shoulder if he's on the ice. Milan Lucic just still floating around. There's Ryan Reeves. There's a couple guys still floating around. Like I do agree that the outdated, one-dimensional tough guy is extinct. I mean, that was me. I understood that. That was part of my exit strategy out of the game, was recognizing that. But if you can create a hybrid type of player, a real tough dude that can skate and wheel, be a power forward, get a regular shift, and keep guys accountable. To me, that should be still in play. I think once there's no accountability, that's when cheap shots arise, and just that lack of respect that I'm talking about. And you get more concussions now than ever. Can't protect your players, and you really can't protect them with your physical body and holding guys up. You get obstruction calls, holding calls, and the way the game is now is like the guys are coached like soccer, is like take the fall, suck it up, and we'll go on the power play. No longer is it like you just have some honor and legitimacy in how you play the game, and you tough it out, and you play that emotional game. So I don't like when the guys hide behind the refs and the rules. It really bothers me. I also recognize that the Broad Street Bullies is probably over aggressive, bench clearing brawls and line brawls. I think that's overkill. But somewhere down the middle, in the middle, we're able to keep the peace, keep some accountability through a little bit of self-policing. It goes a long way. And if you ask most players, they would be on the same page.
And like, do you think like there's any players in the league that may be like that perfect mix of a skill and a tough guy? Because there's like one player that does come to mind, and I know there's a lot of fans in the NHL that hate this guy, but it's Tom Wilson from Washington.
It would be exactly that. Yeah, I forgot about Willie. Yeah, he would be exactly that. Big body, can move, gets on the forecheck, kills guys, and he in modern day NHL, he's probably a top 3 tough guy. I don't know, top 5. I mean, like no one's even really fighting anymore. So I mean, Ryan Reeves would be the toughest guy. Plays a regular shift, can move, just signed another 2-year deal. But those are probably the last two guys standing. But I still feel like the younger generation can still breed guys like that. That play with a chip on their shoulder, but also keep guys honest, and because it's amazing, the power of accountability is truly amazing. Like I speak for myself, like games where I was playing against, whether it's the Rangers or the Washington Capitals when Donald Brashear wasn't playing, or playing Pittsburgh Penguins when George LaRocque wasn't playing, like, and that was a game where I'd fight anybody anyways. But the fact that I was like, oh man, I just like take a deep breath, and be like, oh, it's going to be an easy night for me. So now I'm just going to go run around like a bigger jackass, and then, whoever, and then fight the second or third toughest guy, which is not even the same league as George LaRocque or Brashear at all. So, versus when they're in the lineup, and I know they're in the lineup, I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? So it's like, it changes your mindset. So I understand that most guys aren't fighting George LaRocque or Donald Brashear, but just the fact that you have to be accountable and man up sometimes and answer the bell. Most people don't want to do that, so they'll stay in line enough to not have to ruffle any feathers, to not have to fight, even if it's the middleweight. You know what I mean? It's like who really wants to get punched in the face? It's amazing when you have a presence, whether it's a middleweight, heavyweight, light heavyweight, or super heavyweight. Just having someone that's that's unpredictable in the sense that it's like, okay, if you're gonna act up a little bit, this guy's gonna he's gonna be leaning on you. So just stay in line. Play the game hard. You cross the line, you have to answer the bell now and then. You can't just turtle and hide behind the rules, because then that strategy is just, I don't know. I just lose respect for that strategy. Maybe it's just me being extreme because I was that role, but there's certainly got to be a hybrid there where guys can keep that honor and respect in the game, have some accountability, but keep that high end, fast-paced skill game that's going on today.
And do you think, like, when players like aren't held accountable, like, you think like players like the agitator type of player, like the ones that get under the player's skins and they constantly keep doing what they're doing, and a player that comes to mind, and I know Chris hates this guy, is Brad Marchand. He's a definite guy that needs to be kept in place.
I mean, 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't get away with licking people in the face. You know what I mean? Stuff that's just like,
yeah,
you just don't see in hockey. That would never happen because you'd have a stick shoved down your throat so far that you would probably play another hockey game around your life. It's like you got no one to answer to, and the guys that actually try and challenge him, he plays the big, the big tough guy, yippity yappity type of role, and then he hides behind the rules. So, there's a few other guys like that. That again, those are perfect examples of guys that just they work the system, right? I mean. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do because you jump them. You're getting 2, 5, and 10. They're going on the power play for at least 2 minutes, possibly 7, depends on how bad it looks. And he gets the last laugh. I'm drawing a blank of who it was this year. I guess Cassian and Tkachuk, right? I mean, that's a perfect example of guy runs at him 3 times in probably a period. Eventually, he's had enough. Tries to keep the guy accountable. Tkachuk turtles. Looks like a fool, but in the sense of a team game, they let him go on the power play and won that game because of that play, even though it just looked foolish to anybody that has any integrity in the hockey world. The only thing I do give credit for Tkachuk was the next game he manned up and fought him because he knew he had to. If he wouldn't have, I would have been like, I wouldn't have watched a hockey game the rest of my life. That's a perfect example of okay, well, you have half the people saying, well, look, who gets the last laugh? Cassian or Tkachuk? Well, Cassian, jumps him. I say jumps him and gives him a couple shots because the other guy Tkachuk should have fought. But but Calgary landed up winning the hockey game. It's always about winning the game, right? So it's like there was no integrity in that play. I mean, you want to run someone and play hard, go nuts. But you got to answer the bell, especially when it happens 3 times in a period. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Chuck for actually manning up, but he should have manned up that game. That's a perfect example of But then again, the argument goes is well, if he would have, they wouldn't have gotten the power play and wouldn't have won the game. So I mean, that's the problem I struggle with is that's the strategy and the mindset of these guys where it's I don't know. I hate to see the integrity of the game being abused like that.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing is too, like I don't even think that was the first time. I think that happened with Drew Doughty as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
like he's had run-ins with him many times, and then there's been last where Doughty gets the game winner in overtime, or Kachuk scores versus LA late. It's just like all this stuff happens, and they just don't fight.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
always a scrum or something like that, but then one of them ends up scoring one of them ends up scoring the game winner, or it just goes on, and then the next game everybody's like, oh well, is something gonna happen with Doughty and Kachuk? It's like, why don't they just fight? Like I don't get it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I guess it's just different way, different philosophy, different way of thinking. It's just like, okay, we can build it up and act like we're gonna fight and not fight and just score, score goals.
It definitely increases the ratings, though. People expecting something to happen, but
Right.
sadly, it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of
Yeah,
hype.
yeah. Then for your career, transitioning when you got out of the game of the sport, then you like transitioned to being a coach a little bit with the Phantoms when they moved to Adirondack. So like, how was that transition for you becoming a coach?
Well, it was kind of part of my strategy, as far as recognizing what we talked about, like the extinction of the role, and my future. I had another one-way contract with the Flyers still left. I wasn't in a great place, like say mentally. That was the year Peter Laviolette came. We ended up losing in the finals against Chicago, but I didn't play a whole lot that season. And the reality was I was probably going to sent down to the Phantoms. So knowing all that information, Shell Samuelson's house landed up burning down that summer, and Paul Holmgren called me up and asked me if I wanted to take a job with the Phantoms, knowing my mental state after that season and where I was at. We had year-end meetings and stuff. This was like 2 weeks after the season ended. So he called me and offered me the job. I immediately thought like that was the right thing to do, was to get into coaching, not to be a career-long coach, but to use that as an opportunity to heal and kind of like get my mind straight and get my health back on track. Because I think I was wrapped up in this egocentric world of sports, but then this unique niche within the hockey game of being an enforcer, which is it's pretty mentally taxing. I felt like I was in a chronic state of anxiety and always fighting and always worrying about fighting and thinking about it. And it was like just like constant. So it was like an opportunity to take a breath and be normal, right? I mean, it's like, how long can you really live like that? And I was partying pretty hard, had some substance abuse issues. I was able to kind of avoid a traditional substance abuse program with some plant medicine, and so it was in that time of getting into coaching that I kind of just like grabbed the bull by the horns as far as getting involved and buying into self-care and and doing a lot of things to repair the damage that I caused from fighting. There's just potential CTE and TBI issues, concussion issues. So I really had a serious focus on, again, mitigating some of the collateral damage that I might have caused from fighting, and then also staying in the game with the coaching and being around the guys and staying in the game. So it was multi-pronged why I did it. So to answer your question, the transition was actually really easy for me because it gave me an opportunity to do something that in a sport that I say I loved, which is the coaching, but also gave me an opportunity to go on the other side of the fence from playing and heal. You know what I mean? I stayed out of the bar and stopped drinking. Started doing yoga, started meditating, started really reeling in my diet and focusing on nutritional healing and getting into the understanding of the science behind cannabis and CBD and some of these other minor cannabinoids and psilocybin mushrooms and all these things, which are all healing mechanisms, but they're all outlawed and misunderstood. But they're all tools that I land up using to help get regain my mental health and restore my physical health and mental health. So it was the best decision I ever made. Honestly, it was the hardest thing I had to do in the sense that when I told Homer that I was packing it in and taking the job, that was it. Like that was into my hockey career. Something I'd done my whole life. So it was like part of that was like letting go of that. It was more ego that was holding on to that. But when I made the decision, I knew in my heart that it was the right decision because at the end of the day, it's not about your ego. It's about your overall well-being and mental health, right? So it's like no longer did I care if I was an NHL player, NHL tough guy. I just wanted to be, myself in a good spot, healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually, with or without my last name as being recognizable. So it was, it was awesome, honestly.
And that's where, like, going after your career, getting into the cannabis research, and then that's when you started with the Body Chek Wellness, the Athletes for Care. Like, that's like how, like, what you went through. That's what you're trying to do to help everyone else that's probably going through the same thing that you're going through, just trying to get better rehabilitation.
Yeah, so it started out as Hemp Heals Foundation was the first, I say, advocacy nonprofit that I founded and started, which is basically just showing the different faces of cannabis. So speaking about industrial hemp mainly because there's so many different uses for the cannabis plant, but focusing on just the nutritional component, the hemp seeds and the minor cannabinoids like CBD and the textiles and the building materials and all that stuff. But as I started speaking publicly about this, and this is back in 2010, I started running into different athletes that had been using cannabis-based products to heal, again, their PTSD, their concussion issues, substance abuse issues, addiction issues, whether it's alcohol or opiate. So I realized that there was something there in the sports world to not just help athletes, but to use the sports platform and their storylines to normalize this for the common man, right? And what I realized is, like, whether you're dealing with pain because you got punched in the face, or you're dealing with chronic anxiety because you're fighting all the time, it's really the same type of pain, emotional pain, physical pain that people are going through all over the place, all across the U.S. and Canada and the globe, right? It's inflammation, it's pain, it's anxiety, it's stress, it's sleeping issues. So I realized that, with cannabis, starting with cannabis, that it was an amazing tool to flush inflammation, manage pain in a sustainable way versus you being swallowed up by an opiate and or alcohol. I've seen a ton of guys go through substance abuse programs for booze and pills. So I immediately identified with this as being, drug diversion. This is harm reduction. It's giving guys a better alternative for these destructive substances. So I just started to use my sports platform and my storyline of healing to get the good word out there and normalize and destigmatize cannabis. And that was when we started Athletes for Care. And then we started engaging in some research initiatives to kind of validate the storylines, because an anecdotal story is great. You can tell healing stories all day long, but God knows we need science to validate it in this country, and to have a medical professional and then some science to validate what we're talking about. Certainly just made a whole lot of sense and justified our direction with educating the public and say the world as far as cannabis goes as a recovery tool. So that eventually led to a for-profit business, which is Body Chek Wellness, a hemp-derived CBD and functional mushroom company. Because at that point I had already been advocating and talking about this stuff for 6 or 7 years and doing it for free, essentially. You know what I mean? It was just like doing this out of the goodness of my heart and just because I believed in it so much, and this is before the 2014 Farm Bill, so CBD wasn't even really a thing yet, and people didn't have a clue what that was. So it was almost too early to really to talk about CBD in the sense that you could actually, provide products for everybody at that time. But soon after it started becoming a thing, people started realizing that, wow, it's like you can actually grow hemp exactly like marijuana, and when you start breeding out the THC into quote unquote industrialized hemp plants that are grown below 0.3% THC, that are actually marijuana genetics. So you're growing for high CBD varieties and again, high anti-inflammatory. So all of a sudden it opens up this whole other market for cannabis-based users that don't want to get high. So for people that obviously have an issue with cannabis, it's the THC they have an issue with, right? It's a psychotropic compound that, in higher doses can impair you. So all of a sudden it's like this whole other world of cannabis-based products that don't get you high. Offer the anti-inflammatory, the pain management, the anti-anxiety, the sleep, and the neuroprotective properties, again, without the high and the munchies. So it just opened up a whole other, door for consumers. And that's really when it kind of started becoming mainstream. is because people started realizing, oh, I get it. I started to understand cannabis a little more. It's not just Cheech and Chong, smoking high THC varieties on the couch. I was getting ready to fire up this right here. This is high CBD, high CBD flower that is grown under the industrial hemp laws, below 0.3% THC and totally legal. It's essentially marijuana without the THC. So it's like, well, people are like, what's the point? But it's like, well, we don't need to get that stoned all the time either. You know what I mean? It's like THC is valuable, and I do appreciate it, but I also understand balance, and that's one of the things I've learned through this journey. Is that, I mean, I've been a cannabis user since I was 15 years old, but when you're introduced to this in a recreational setting with no guidance, no science, no nothing, you're on your own to figure this thing out on your own, right? So this was a Schedule I drug, just like heroin, ecstasy, and cocaine, and the rest of the street drugs that I was introduced with at the same time. So now, with my experience of consuming cannabis from 15 to say 28, with no true intention, I didn't really understand what I was doing. It was giving me relief. I didn't really understand the exact therapeutic value it was giving me, but it was calming my nervous system. It was helping with anxiety when I was fighting George the Rock and all these guys in the minor leagues. I didn't really identify with how it was helping me until I started to understand the science of like, I get it now. I get what it was doing. I know why I was sleeping so well, and all these different things. But then all of a sudden I was like, okay, well, now once I started like recognizing that my brain was say healed, or I was able to get the relief I needed out of these tools, I was able to titrate back and use less THC. So that's why I go heavy on the CBD. It's anti-inflammatory. We're always trying to rid ourselves of inflammation, and whether it's through a tincture or a topical, or just a tea, or smoking. The whole idea is to remove inflammation and calm the nervous system. I think if you do both of those things, you'll end up being healthy, because I mean, every disease state is inflammation, and stress and anxiety create inflammation. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you understand those two things, you can understand wellness. Certain things induce inflammation, like a diet of processed foods and refined sugars. It's very inflammatory, mucus forming. And then you can have a diet that's anti-inflammatory, whole foods, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, like that. The same thing goes with medicine and tools. I mean, people are using stimulants all day long. You talk about a Red Bull or some Monster Energy. I mean, how much inflammation that's inducing into your body, let alone stimulating the nervous system and making you anxious. So I don't know where exactly I was going with all that, but the point being is that these tools are amazing, and they need to be taught the right way, because even in the medical cannabis program, I see it's such high THC varieties. And THC, if you guys have ever used THC before, as soon as you cross that threshold of say calmness, and now all of a sudden you've consumed too much, say overconsumed cannabis, well, it induces anxiety. The whole idea with cannabis or any tool is to calm the nervous system. We're trying to calm ourselves and manage our stress, not induce stress and anxiety. So that's when a valuable tool can become a weapon. And I see it happen all the time with cannabis too. I mean, people abuse cannabis, and they take it to that next level where it's actually affecting the nervous system versus calming the nervous system. But I guess when you talk about it from a position of harm reduction and drug diversion, it's certainly better people using cannabis than heroin. And I mean, in my opinion and from my experience, it's certainly better to using cannabis than alcohol. If you talk about what it does for the human what it does for the human mind, or works against the human mind. I mean, booze dehydrates the brain. It's hard on the liver, it's hard on the gut, it's hard on the spirit. And cannabis is a mild energy compared to that. So again, getting people off those things with these alternative plant medicines is really what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. And for people that are listening to this podcast, during my time, like at my senior year at Temple, like going into my last semester, I got an internship at a media company that Riley was a part of. It was called Mastermind Media Lab, and like during that internship process, we were working on like Riley's website and developing this brand called Cote Culture. So like I wanted you to describe like what does Cote Culture mean to the people that are listening here? Like what does it mean to you?
To sum it up, it's self-care and life transformation. So my whole mission in life now is to teach people how not to get sick and not to be stressed and how to live the highest quality of life they could possibly live. And it all starts with self-care. It's putting the right foods in your body. It's waking up early and meditating. It's expressing yourself, positively through the arts, whether it's writing, creating content, dancing, whatever it lands up being, it's just nourishing the spirit and feeling well. I realize that there's a mental health crisis in this country and probably globally. And that was before this pandemic. And what people, I realized, really struggle with is finding peace and happiness within themselves, in this egocentric, materialistic world. We're always looking outside of ourselves for satisfaction and fulfillment. And I tried to do that, back in the day in the NHL. I thought that living my childhood dream would be fulfilling and all these things, but I think I was chasing it for the wrong reasons. But my point being is that we're just unfulfilled because we don't do the work. We just want to go live this unsustainable life and eat all this bullshit food and drink all day long every day and party and not take care of ourselves. And then when we get sick, we're just going to go to the doctor and he's going to magically cure us. And I think it's a naive way of thinking, and unfortunately it's a dangerous way of thinking, because God knows Mother Nature don't work that way. And we are Mother Nature. We're part of Mother Nature, and we need to work in line with the laws of Mother Nature. And that's just simple fundamentals, right? It's clean water, it's clean food, clean air, right? I mean, removing negative energies, and that's negative people around you, protecting what you let in your headspace. To again, the foods, it could be toxic. Your food could be either medicine or poison, So again, just understanding that and just focusing on overall physical, mental, and spiritual wellness, really. I mean, because it's all connected if you understand it that way. So I know it's a little bit much there, but really self-care and life transformation is what it's all about. It's self-care. And no matter how hard of a life you've lived, how many struggles you've had, adversities, there's always opportunity to transform, make a change, and be better. That can happen in an instant if you commit to it. But it's nothing more than committing to a disciplined life and really focusing on a series of daily behaviors and just observing your daily behaviors and recognizing are these positive or negative, and then start going through them and then adjusting. Starting with diet. Starting with the way we think. We wake up in the morning. Are you motherfucking the government and the past and the president and the mayor and all these different people? Or are you waking up and being at peace with what's going on and finding peace in yourself, and then focus on creating and building and doing something productive in your life, right? I mean, it's easy to focus on all the distractions and the negativity. And just like, your food, your food is either medicine or it's poison. It's like it's no different than the things you let in your headspace. It's either food or that's either medicine or it's poison, right? It's either building you and making you a better person, or it's just dragging you down and it's negative energy. So just making people aware of simple fundamentals. Really, it's not complicated. I think most people know the answers to their problems. It's just being honest with themselves and being disciplined enough to change their daily behaviors, honestly.
Yeah, and before like all the stuff that was happening along the world right now, like did you ever consider teaching people like the ways that you live, how to probably live a proper life with these healthier ways, before all this crap happened in the world right now?
Yeah, and I was doing that, and I am doing that. It just lands up being a little bit more challenging than a little more Zoom calls now. But yeah, I'm trying to scale my philosophy. I guess that's exactly what Cote culture is. It's essentially a philosophy of my version of self-care and life transformation. And everyone's got their little tweaks when you're talking about people in this world that are pushing this type of thinking. But they're almost all in line. If you talk about overall pillars of philosophy, they're almost all the same, right? I mean, you can't argue certain things when you talk about just basic wellness. So it's becoming more mindful, really, just helping people become more aware, right? I mean, it's like the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink it, right? I mean, you tell people the truth, and sometimes, most of the time, these are inconvenient truths, right? I mean, it's very, very inconvenient because most people don't want to hear it to make change, right? They resist change and they just want to stay comfortable in their environment. So you're challenging people's belief systems by introducing simple ways of living, because we've been so consumed that with all this consumerism and commercials and marketing and all this other stuff, we don't even know what to eat, what to buy, where to look, what to do. So simplifying life. And so to your point, I mean, I'm doing it already. I'd like to be able to scale this philosophy as just more of a mainstream way of thinking. It's just really simplifying the way we think, and kind of snapping out of it and waking up and being like, hey, well, I am actually in control of my own life. I am actually in control of my own health and mental health, and not just having these excuses and these scapegoats of just like blaming it on something else or somebody else or underlying conditioning or genetics. And it's like another old saying, it's lifestyle genetics load the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. It's like we all have our own genetics that are predisposed to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're destined for these things to happen. So if mom and dad are 400, 500 pounds and overweight, they give birth to little Joey. If he's raised in in their house, he's naturally going to be probably 400 or 500 pounds based on environment. If you take little Joey out of that environment and you eat him and you feed him some nutrient-rich foods and you focus on hydration, you teach him how to live properly, you're not going to express those genetics to be 450, 500 pounds. So, the point being is that it's the environment, it's the lifestyle that changes the genetics and expresses them, whether it's obesity in this situation or cancer, heart disease, diabetes. And we have the luxury, I say, to be in control of that, based on our decisions. So that's what I'm trying to teach, give people, empower people and give them, some information where they can be accountable and grab this thing by the horns and take it in their own hands.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry, Amadeo. And one thing I wanted to ask too, has there been anything that like you've done, like changing like your diet or anything along those lines, or maybe like with fitness, like to kind of change and kind of go into a different path?
Yeah, honestly, it's funny because it's everything I did while I was playing hockey, I do the opposite almost. So, for example, I was a big meat eater and big calorie eater. I was eating like close to 5,000 calories a day and just like protein fiend and just going on my way to just overconsume. You talk about substance abuse, I abuse food like nobody's business. Now, I mean, I intermittent fast till probably 2 p.m. every day. I hardly even eat before noon most days. Days I don't even fast. Hydration, ton of water. So from a diet standpoint, probably eating a fraction of the calories and rarely eat meat. I mean, I'm not a vegan, but now and then I will have say a wild piece of a venison or something that comes along my path that's been sustainably sourced or wild hunted. And then you go to the exercise you mentioned, lifting heavy weights and taxing my joints and muscles for years and years and years and putting my body through the grind and squatting 500 pounds on my neck where my spine is calloused, to not even lifting a weight and owning a gym membership for the last 5 years up until this last month where I signed up for a gym that has hot yoga. So my form of exercise since I retired has been mainly yoga. The last 5 years has been all yoga, and
I've been seeing a lot of that on your Instagram.
Yoga.
Yeah.
So everything has changed. I mean, from focusing on just calories to nutrients, from stressing out the body and shortening muscles to lengthening muscles and breathing. Shallow breathing when I was fighting and not even paying attention to breath to doing breath work. I mean, it's a little bit of everything. Meditating. I never spent any time by myself and finding stillness and peace and, meditate every day. Never read a full book in my whole life and, obsessed with reading, never, really expressed outside of fighting. And now I'm writing and, doing content and all this other stuff. So everything's changed, and it's a constant progression. I'm learning all the time and I'm expressing more and realizing how much potential I actually do have and how much power I do have if I just keep doing the right things. That's what I've learned for sure.
Yeah, and that's definitely a great thing. And like, if people like were interested in like learning from you, like where can they go to find that out? Like, where can they go to like find those teachings from you?
Well, coteculture.com, and I'm still, at the beginning stages of, putting out the content, and part of it is by strategy of, not showing my hand too much, but also, and engaging interest, but also it's taking time to put together, legitimate content. So I kind of, once it starts coming, it's going to be coming consistently, and I'm very close to be doing that. So it's been a process, juggling a lot of balls too. Outside of that brand, it's been, the Hemp Thrive CBD functional mushrooms, an extraction facility, some real estate, and this other psilocybin company that I'm involved in. So I'm just trying to be more wise with my time and outsource certain things where I'm able to produce more and have, certain people work on some of the stuff that, even though I enjoy doing it, like editing, I actually enjoy editing video, but I also understand it is a time, it's a time and resource drain. And, I'm trying to do all these different things, but yeah. And, or you can, just reach out to me too. And I do a lot of one-on-one stuff with people. Whether it's just literally talking to someone for 30 minutes. It's amazing if you talk to someone for 30 minutes, you can just create enough awareness in that conversation where they can go back and reflect on it, where they, hey, that's all it is. That's all I care about at the end of the day is, like, as long as you become more mindful and aware of your behaviors, then you slowly but surely you will start reeling in your behaviors. You know what I mean? But it's just a simple conversation. So, it's not like I'm going to magically touch someone on the shoulder and going to heal anybody. I think the healing is always on the person that needs to be healed. The healer doesn't really do the healing. He just helps guide these people to information and just different ways of thinking where they're able to recognize how to heal, and reel in their negative daily behaviors. So, Cote Culture, and then on any of my social media platforms, I'm pretty available too. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah, definitely. And then as we get into near the end, let's talk about the Flyers today, guys. We're getting closer and closer to Phase 4 of the playoffs. We're in the middle of Phase 3 right now. So, Riley, like, how have you thought about the Flyers this season? Like, what do you think about their chances going into this playoff tournament, the weird playoff tournament?
Hey, I mean, it's a brand new season, in my opinion. I mean, it's anybody's game, and if the Flyers can pick up anywhere where they left off there, momentum wise, I mean, I don't see why they don't have a standing chance. You know what I mean? They got a young, hungry goaltender, which is, the key ingredient in playoffs. If Carter Hart can stand on his head and win him a couple games, and the team can rally around him. I mean, I remember my last year in 2010, the goalie cycle we had there with Leighton and Emery and Bush, and all you need is just a little momentum. We got the momentum in the last game of the season, in a shootout against the Rangers, and we rode that momentum. So it's just whoever can kind of get their legs under them first. I think Flyers have some good young legs. I think they're a hungry team. Again, I always go back to the goaltending because it's just like such a key piece in playoffs. So I don't see why they don't have a legitimate shot. I mean, all these other teams have been sitting at home too. Whatever momentum was there, they're gonna have to find somewhere else. So it'll be interesting. I'm rooting for the Flyers. I got a good feel. I got a good feeling that they'll. I don't want to be bold and say that they're going to go all the way, but I think they're going to have a really strong, positive run. Honestly.
Yeah, definitely. And Chris has always told me that he's going to reserve a spot on Broad Street, and he's going to be wearing a hazmat suit since we're in the times that we're in right now. And when we were talking to Derek Settlemeyer last week, he was consistently doing the knock on wood so he wouldn't jinx anything.
Right.
So, like, it's like that's the mindset with all Flyers fans right now, which is people in the Flyers community. Like, this team is different. They feel like this team can actually do something for once.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting to see. And Chris, I know, like, you haven't been a Flyers fan for that long, but it's still, like, nice to be a part of a team that finally can do something, probably.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, many listeners know this. I started becoming a fan in the last lockout, 12-13. So they were bad then, and they made the playoffs one year, missed the next, made it one year, missed the next, and that's kind of how it was. And then this season is kind of the best winning, the best team I've seen, and the realistically the only winning team for majority of the year, and honestly, really for the whole year. But again, I mean, I like their chances. It seems like everybody else does, so I'm hoping they can pull something out here.
Yeah, just going with the whole playoff tournament, like Right, like, what do you think? Who is the most important player? Because I know you've been talking about Carter Hart, but like, do you think it's another young guy that's more important, or do you think it's like a veteran that's more important to this team to get them on that run?
Well, obviously, it's a collective unit. I've learned about in playoffs. Not that I was ever a go-to guys, but you got to have four lines going, right? I mean, it's like obviously you need your leaders to be your best players. You need your best players to be your best players. That's obvious, right? But at some point in playoffs, the matchups they're going to be all over G. They're going to be all over the 1-2 guys. So you need some secondary and third scoring, and the teams that do that the best are the teams that win. I mean, you look at Pittsburgh Penguins back in the day with Talbot and some of these guys. You need some you need fourth line scoring. But I mean, a guy, I look at a guy like Konechny. I think he's got another gear. I mean, I think he's full of piss and vinegar. To me, a guy like that could do some damage in the playoffs. And I like the decor for the most part. But I think it's going to be a combination of G being the best G he can ever be, and Carter Hart being the best he could possibly be, and the guys rallying around that, and then having some young spirit like a guy like Travis. I always go back to him because I just think that he has some amazing energy that can rub off on some of these older guys that get in funks and whatnot. But it's obviously a collective unit there. But I think a couple of those ingredients you have there, I think the team has been interesting to watch. Honestly, I mean, like to your point there, Christopher, like the last few years have been almost painful. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
For whatever reason, this year they just felt like they always had a standing chance. Their energy, even if they lost, I felt their energy was there, and to me, that's the most important ingredient. And I've been on teams that had shitty goaltending, and it's amazing how deflating it is. Like you could have a great first period, but as soon as that 1 weak goal goes in, it's like I don't see that at all as being an issue. In fact, I've seen the opposite too. When you have good goaltending, how teams rally around a goalie that's hot and is confident. So I don't know. They got a few nice pieces there. It's just a matter of getting your legs under them. Right off the bat. Playing at a high tempo right off the bat because there's no time to wait. There's no time to have a slow start. So it's like you better be on the top of your game right off the bat. So I think again, Carter Hart's got his head screwed on right. You get young guys that are anxious, and I think G is really a good leader. He's a quiet leader, but if G can be his best, they got a legitimate chance for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to get your thought on the whole situation that's revolving around Nolan Patrick, because everyone's been going back and forth with him not being on the playoff roster, just like with him dealing with the migraine issue. Like, and then people are constantly saying, "Oh, his career is done. He's a bust," and just like it's a constant back and forth. And then, like, I just want to give your thoughts on the whole situation. Like, what are your thoughts with Nolan Patrick right now?
Well, I think it was smart not putting him on the playoff roster. He's not going to play. I mean, he hasn't played all year. So, I mean, you may as well just chalk up the season as being a write-off and get this guy the help he needs. Unfortunately for him, I mean, he's tried everything. I mean, this guy's been dragged through the ringer several times, and they can't get to the bottom of it for whatever reason. So, I mean, I feel for him. I mean, for fans that want to call him a bust, I mean, I'm more worried about this guy's health, and his brain health, like long term. So, yeah, call him a bust, call him what you will, but I mean, the bottom line is you got to get this guy healthy. I think that will eventually happen. I just am almost shocked that this is taking this long. So it's unfortunate. I mean, it's like most of these types of things resolve themselves, over say shorter, a little bit, longer periods of time. But this is like extremely long. So I don't know what else to say besides it's an absolute bummer for him and the Flyers. But I mean, I think as far as a call on it, I mean, it was the right call. Why would you ever put him in a situation where he hasn't even? I don't even think he stepped foot into a full practice all year. Has he? I mean,
Probably not even
Yeah.
since training camp, probably.
Yeah, and even training camp, they had him on the injured side, so he was on the Phantoms rink,
right.
and he was just practicing over there. The only time that he really did practice with the team was, I believe it was only optional skates and the skills practice, so there wasn't really much he was doing. And to go off your point, and another thing is too is that with everything with them expanding the roster, if he could have played and they put him on the team, then they don't want to risk it where if something happens, like before a game or something, then it's a waste of a roster spot. So I think that was another thing too. But again, I mean, I just personally think that it's the best decision for him, and I think it's the best decision for the team in the long run, where you kind of just have to wait and play it safely, and really just do the best you can.
I agree. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't disappointed because it wasn't a shocker to him that he wasn't on. You know what I mean? It wasn't obviously disappointed. I shouldn't say it like that, but I don't think he was surprised by the fact he was on the roster. I mean, let's be serious. The guy hasn't suited up all year, so to put him in an NHL playoff series doesn't seem right. So they made the right decision. It's unfortunate. Just wish him the best, and hopefully he can find the root cause of what's going on, because it's way too young for that to be happening, and you don't want to be dealing with that the rest of your life. I can assure you that.
Yeah, definitely. And just like as we stated in like our previous episode, like the best option right now is just like focus on him getting ready for next season. Just like get 100% and be okay. Like no point in wasting a roster spot and possibly forcing another injury on him if he goes and play a playoff game.
Yeah. So you give yourself whatever the time frame is, an extra 6 months. They're probably not going to start till January or late December or whatever. To me, it's just it's such a no-brainer. You know, heal the brain
and
figure it out. Come back in the best shape you possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. And
too young for that, then he'll really bust if something happens. If comes back, and I say come back too early, but you come back when you're not ready is the key, and and then something happens, and then you're out for the rest of your career or something. But I think they made the right decision. He's obviously in the know on all that, how he's feeling. I mean, it's like you don't want to ever put anybody in a position that they're going to struggle or be set up for failure.
Definitely. And I think another thing was too is that even though he was practicing and stuff, like he didn't see a lick of contact. So that's another thing too, especially with the head. You can't mess with that at all.
No. And I realize how durable and also fragile the human body and brain is. I mean, you see some guys go down with concussions, and they literally just get just grazed, whether it's in the jaw in practice, or you run into something and all of a sudden you're out. So it's like it's one of those things that it doesn't take a whole lot to get a head injury, especially for a guy that's been dealing with one for a whole year. So durable yet fragile. So again, it could be just one little bump away from putting him over and being the straw that breaks the camel's back. So let him heal. Obviously, if he hasn't healed in a year, I mean, another 6 months could probably do him some good. So
I agree 100% with you right there. And we're getting right at the end of this episode of the Fired Up Podcast. So we want to thank you again, Riley, for joining us once again on this podcast. So like, where can people go to follow you on your social media pages?
So I'm on Instagram at Riley Cote 32, Twitter at Riley Coyote, just Riley Cote on Facebook, LinkedIn, just Riley Cote. Yeah, and then Body Chek Wellness, Chek, CHEK, bodychekwellness.com, and coteculture.com. So more content coming there. And appreciate the time, guys.
Yeah, thank you, and I can't wait to see once everything gets started up once again. So thank you, Riley, for joining us. Everyone listening to the Fired Up Podcast, don't forget to follow us on our social media pages, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Fired Up Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fired Up Podcast, where the video form of this is also going up with Riley. So thank you for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Amadeo Gracia. He is Chris Mayer, and we will see you next time.